Hey guys, tonight we drift across a continent of sunlight and silence. Africa before the maps were redrawn, before gold had a price tag and glass beads were just whispers from distant shores. You could almost feel the weight of heat pressing on your shoulders, hear the hum of insects hidden in the grasslands, and see, in the far distance, a caravan shimmering like a mirage. We're going to wander slowly, no rush, through forgotten African kingdoms that once traded gold for glass beads. You'll meet merchants who measured value by sunlight and storytellers who shaped history while half asleep beside their camels. You probably wouldn't survive this journey, by the way. The heat alone would make your Wi-Fi signal cry for mercy. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it there? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You begin on the western edge of Africa, somewhere between myth and map. The air tastes of salt and dust. The sun's reflection off the Niger River feels like liquid metal, and traders in loose indigo robes guide you toward a market that has no walls. It's here, in the heart of the Sahel, that gold veins stretch underground like sleeping serpents, and beads, tiny, glassy, glinting things, have traveled all the way from Persia, India, maybe even Venice. People call this place the land of gold, but the truth is less dramatic and more beautiful. You notice how quietly the wealth moves. Gold dust stored in feathers, sewn into pouches, poured like sand into scales. The trade isn't noisy. It's a murmur between hands. Gold goes north. Cloth and beads come south. Everything balances, for now. A griot begins to sing, a voice as dry as the wind, yet carrying centuries. You don't understand the words, but the rhythm feels like footsteps through time. Historians still argue whether these early trade routes were formalized kingdoms or loose federations of merchants who simply decided to cooperate because the desert was too big to cross alone. Either way, you're standing in the origin story of West African wealth. Not the mythic kind dripping with jewels, but the human kind, built on patience and trust. At the edge of the market, a child shows you a handful of glass beads. They sparkle like captured rainbows. "From across the sea," she says, pointing vaguely northward. You imagine the journey, across dunes, down rivers, through dozens of languages. Every bead has changed hands a dozen times, carrying gossip and fingerprints from lands you've never seen. And here's a quirky little fact. The beads often arrived as ballast in ships, used to steady the hulls during ocean voyages. Once unloaded, they became treasures worth more than their weight in gold. So technically, some of Africa's most valued trade goods began their journey as humble cargo filler, a reminder that the world's luxury often starts as someone else's afterthought. The desert wind picks up. You shield your face, watching as dust curls into spirals, the kind that make you feel both small and infinite. A caravan is forming in the distance, camels kneeling, traders adjusting saddlebags filled with salt slabs gleaming white in the sun. You'll join them soon, but for now, you linger in this place between heat and history, where the hum of commerce sounds like a lullaby. The leader of the caravan, a man with a face carved by wind and time, tells you stories while inspecting his camels. He speaks of distant cities made of coral and gold, of kings who wear robes dyed with imported indigo so deep it almost looks black. Everything moves, he says. Gold goes north, beads come south. What stays still turns to dust. Historians think that's not just poetry. Movement defined this world. Trade wasn't just about goods. It was about information, religion, art, even architecture. You could trace the spread of Islam, the birth of entire dialects, and the shape of roads from the footprints of these merchants. You watch as the caravan sets off. Hundreds of camels strung in a line so long it seems to bend the horizon. The bells on their necks chime softly, like lazy wind chimes in a courtyard. You begin walking beside them, sand crunching under your sandals. The sun lowers. Shadows stretch. Somewhere ahead, an oasis waits, a place with cool water, palm trees, and maybe a rumor of gold buried beneath its roots. A light joke drifts through your tired thoughts. You wonder how many Fitbit steps this would count as. Probably enough to earn a lifetime badge. As night falls, the desert cools rapidly. You lie under a canopy of stars so dense it feels like the sky forgot how to be empty. Traders murmur around you. Prayers, songs, and negotiations whispered half in Arabic, half in local tongues. Someone mentions the kingdom of Ghana, far ahead, the place where this gold truly shines. You'll get there soon enough, but right now, your eyelids grow heavy. The desert hums softly, and even the camels seem to breathe in rhythm with the wind. You can almost hear the faint rattle of glass beads like tiny lullabies carried on the air. Proof that the world has always been connected long before cables or satellites. As you drift between wakefulness and dream, you think of how this trade, gold for glass, was more than economics. It was the first glittering handshake between continents. And you, here in the quiet sand, are its witness. The caravan moves at dawn, long before the sun decides to take the desert seriously. You wake to the low, sleepy rumble, camels groaning in protest, their shadows stretching thin over the sand. Ahead of you lies Kumbi Saleh, the capital of the Kingdom of Ghana, though kingdom might feel too formal a word for what's waiting. It's a network of courtyards, narrow alleys, and clay walls that glow pink under the rising light, like the earth itself decided to blush. By the time you arrive, the market is already alive, quiet but purposeful. No shouting here, just the muted clink of scales, the soft scuff of sandals, and the scent of sweat, incense, and roasted millet. Gold dust moves invisibly, tucked into feathers, gourds, and scraps of fabric. Salt glints in the corners like frozen sunlight. You pass through two cities that touch but do not blend. One is for the king and his court, filled with ornate houses, stables, and rooms for the scribes who turn transactions into memory. The other belongs to traders, travelers, and strangers who pass through like dreams. It's said that between these two halves, the air itself carries the sound of bargaining, a kind of heartbeat that keeps the kingdom alive. Historians still argue whether Ghana's capital had true city planning or if it simply expanded like a beehive, every generation adding another honeycomb of clay. You walk through its winding paths, unsure where the palace begins and the marketplace ends. Every turn feels half ancient, half improvised. You meet a merchant sitting cross-legged beside a small wooden scale. His fingers glitter faintly with gold dust, evidence of a busy morning. He greets you in a tone that suggests you might be more interesting as a customer than as company. Before him lies small brass weights shaped like crocodiles, fish, and coiled snakes. Each one represents a specific value. He balances them with care, adding a pinch of gold dust to the opposite pan until the beam levels perfectly. You ask what he's selling. Trust, he replies without irony. That's not far from the truth. In this economy, every trade rests on mutual belief. Gold is weighed in secret, prices spoken softly, and oaths sworn on reputation. There are no coins, just measured promises. You find that oddly soothing. Nearby, children chase a herd of goats down an alley. The goats seem unimpressed, trotting as if late for an appointment. A woman leans from a window, humming a tune about the king's justice, fair but unpredictable, like rain in the desert. The song becomes your background soundtrack as you wander deeper into the city. Here's your mainstream historical fact. Ghana's wealth came largely from controlling the flow of trade rather than mining all the gold itself. The real gold fields lay to the south, but Ghana sat at the crossroads, collecting taxes on every grain of dust that crossed its borders. It was a kingdom built on patience, paperwork, and the world's earliest version of a toll booth. A quirky tidbit for you. Archaeologists once found evidence that some traders here used ostrich eggshells as containers for gold dust. So yes, people literally carried fortunes in breakfast material. You picture an ancient customs officer squinting at an egg and muttering, "Please declare all valuables and poultry." In the royal quarter, you find the king's court in session. He sits surrounded by cushions and silence, draped in fine cotton dyed red and blue. Behind him, hundreds of dogs with golden collars stand at attention, a detail recorded by Arab travelers who couldn't decide whether to be impressed or alarmed. You, however, just imagine the chaos if even one of those dogs decided to chase a goat through the market. Trade envoys approach with gifts, salt slabs, glass beads, woven cloth. The king's interpreters relay greetings from faraway lands, North African traders who have crossed the desert with news and luxury goods. Beads are poured out in a slow, glittering cascade. They look like frozen raindrops. The king studies them without expression, as though trying to decide if they're beautiful or merely strange. The moment passes. The beads will be bartered later for gold dust, ivory, or slaves. For now, they symbolize connection, proof that the world is wider than the horizon. You step back into the sunlight. The air smells faintly metallic, the way it does before a storm. A line of camels stands ready to leave, their neck bell necklaces chiming softly. You notice how everything in this place feels temporary yet timeless. Even the walls seem built for eventual ruin, mud brick accepting its destiny to crumble back into dust. There's a phrase one traveler once wrote about Ghana: "In their land, gold grows like carrots." You smile at the exaggeration but understand the sentiment. To outsiders, this place must have felt impossibly rich, impossibly mysterious. To those who lived here, it was just home. Hot, dusty, alive with stories. As dusk approaches, you sit near a fire where traders roast millet cakes. The conversation turns to rumors. A new leader rising in the south, a warrior named Sundiata, whispers of a new power that will outshine Ghana itself. You don't know it yet, but you're hearing the first tremors of Mali. Someone passes you a bowl of cool water. You drink slowly, savoring the relief. The stars begin to appear, at first shy, then all at once, like someone unzipping the night sky. You think again of those glass beads, their journey from far-off coasts, their transformation from ballast to treasure. They catch the firelight even here, tiny sparks of color in a world painted gold and dust. A trader nearby murmurs a proverb: "Gold is heavy, but stories travel farther." You file that away. It feels important, the kind of wisdom that lingers long after the fire goes out. The night deepens, the market quiets. You stretch out on a woven mat beside your small pouch of beads, your ticket, perhaps, to whatever lies beyond this kingdom's edge. The wind sighs softly through the alleys, carrying with it the faint scent of salt and the promise of change. Soon, you'll follow that scent across the dunes again, toward Mali's shimmering rise and the great river that snakes through legend. But for now, you let sleep take you. The kind of sleep that feels older than maps, older than trade, even older than gold. The next morning begins with sand in your mouth and the faint sound of camel bells receding into the horizon. You pack slowly, rubbing the stiffness from your legs. Around you, the air already shimmers, heat rising like ghosts of yesterday's travelers. You're heading north now, toward the endless Sahara, following the trade routes that made kings wealthy and wanderers wise. A few of the merchants from Kumbi Saleh travel with you, veterans of the dunes, faces wrapped in indigo turbans that leave only their eyes exposed. They move with the calm efficiency of people who have accepted that the desert doesn't care about their schedules. You soon realize that the Sahara isn't empty, it's simply quiet. The wind carries a constant whisper, like someone telling stories just out of earshot. Dunes shift with a sigh, burying old tracks, revealing others. A mirage shimmers ahead, a promise of water that refuses to exist. As you walk, one of the traders begins explaining why the most valuable cargo in these caravans isn't gold or cloth, but salt. Yes, salt. The stuff you sprinkle carelessly on fries. He tells you that in this part of the world, salt is survival. It preserves food, balances the body in punishing heat, and in some eras was traded ounce for gold dust. Historians still argue whether salt's value in West Africa came purely from scarcity or from its symbolic association with purity and life. You lean toward the practical explanation. When you've marched across 500 miles of sand, a pinch of salt might as well be treasure. You pass a caravan heading the opposite direction. Dozens of camels burdened with massive salt slabs from Tagaza, shimmering white against the sun. The men leading them chant softly, rhythmic and hypnotic, matching each step to the rise and fall of their song. One gestures toward your group with a friendly nod, and for a brief, silent moment, two worlds meet in the middle of nowhere. Gold going north, salt coming south, beads crossing in between. That's the miracle of the desert. It looks lifeless, but it's the crossroads of empires. At midday, your guide calls for a rest near a cluster of acacia trees, the only shade for miles. You sit beneath one, sharing dried dates and flatbread. A small goat trots past, looking entirely too confident for its surroundings. Someone jokes that it's been lost for 3 dynasties and refuses to admit it. You laugh, the sound dry and cracked like the wind itself. A mainstream historical fact slips into the conversation. The Trans-Saharan Trade Network connected not just Africa's interior to the Mediterranean, but also helped spread Islam, literacy, and architectural styles. Every bag of salt carried ideas along with it. You realize these caravans were less about commerce and more about conversation, miles-long moving universities where news, prayers, and recipes traveled side by side. A quirky tidbit, archaeologists once found fragments of North African pottery and glassware buried deep in Saharan oases. They suspect that some traders, bored during rest stops, played games using imported beads as counters. You imagine a group of sunburned men gambling with what, in another context, could buy a small palace. The heat grows unbearable. You wrap your headscarf tighter, feeling sweat collect beneath the fabric. The sand burns through your sandals. Even the camels begin to look annoyed, which is impressive considering how little emotional range they usually show. You whisper to one, "You and me both, buddy," and you're fairly sure he rolls his eyes. When night comes, it does so dramatically. The sun drops as though someone snuffed it out, leaving only a cool silver emptiness. The stars appear again, sharp and infinite. Fires flicker across the camp like tiny worlds being born. You sit near one, cradling a cup of sweet mint tea poured from a dented kettle. The trader beside you, a Tuareg man named Idris, tells stories about his grandfather's grandfather, who once led a caravan that vanished for 3 months and reappeared richer than ever. No one knows how, Idris says with a grin. Some say they found a city buried beneath the dunes. Others say they stole from the wind. Historians still argue whether such tales reflect real lost trade settlements or just the desert's habit of swallowing memory. Either way, it makes good campfire material. Idris points north. Tomorrow, he says, we cross the Whispering Dunes. He warns you they're named not for spirits, but for the eerie sound of sand cascading down their slopes, like a sighing chorus. You lie awake later listening to the dunes breathe and realize he's right. The desert isn't silent. It's just speaking a language too old for words. The next day, you rise before dawn. The horizon glows faintly, a pale ribbon between shadow and flame. You trudge forward one slow step at a time, your body moving automatically, your thoughts drifting. The repetition becomes meditative. You start noticing details, the texture of wind-carved ridges, the rhythmic swaying of camels, the tiny footprints of a desert fox. Around midday, a shimmer on the horizon resolves into a caravan well, an oasis surrounded by date palms. The sight feels miraculous. You rush forward, kneel, and splash your face with cool water. It tastes faintly metallic, but it's life itself. You refill your flask, feeling instantly more human. Nearby, an older merchant is quietly repairing his saddle strap. He hums under his breath, a melody without words. When you ask its meaning, he shrugs. Old song, maybe older than the dunes. He pauses. It says everything returns. You wake to the scent of river mud, an almost shocking perfume after so many days of sand and silence. The dunes have softened into rolling plains, and ahead of you the horizon breaks open into a gleaming ribbon of silver. The Niger River. You've reached the heart of the Mandinka lands, where the kingdom of Mali is beginning to rise from Ghana's fading shadow. The morning air is cooler here. Birds chatter in the reeds, and you catch the laughter of fishermen hauling up nets strung with catfish that gleam like polished metal. Everything feels alive again. Water replacing dust, green spilling into the edges of your vision. You walk along the riverbank toward Niani, a city still growing, still dreaming. It's said to be the home of Sundiata Keita, the Lion King of Mali, the founder of an empire that will soon rival any in the world. But right now, it's just a cluster of sun-baked houses, markets, and music floating on the breeze. Children chase goats through alleys. Women pound millet in wooden mortars with a steady rhythm that feels almost like drumming. Traders sit beneath woven awnings, offering gold dust, kola nuts, dyed cloth, and those same glass beads that seem to follow you everywhere. The tiniest ghosts of global connection. A griot approaches you, carrying a kora, a 21-string harp lute that looks like someone fused a gourd with a dream. He begins to play softly, his voice slow and melodic. You recognize fragments of a story you've already overheard in the desert, the legend of Sundiata. He sings of a boy who could not walk, of a prophecy whispered before his birth, and of a kingdom stolen by a jealous usurper. He sings of how the boy rose, slowly, painfully, to his feet, then to greatness, uniting the Mandinka clans under one banner. It's both myth and memory, the kind of tale that survives not because it's perfect, but because it feels true. Historians still argue whether Sundiata Keita was a single man or a composite of many heroes stitched together by centuries of storytelling. But the griot's eyes gleam with conviction. To him, the story's truth is not in its accuracy, but in its rhythm. You sit there listening, half entranced, half lulled by the sound of plucked strings and cicadas. The griot tells you that in Mali, memory isn't stored in books, it's sung. Every family, every village has a griot who guards their lineage, like a living library that breathes and hums. He smiles and says, "Paper forgets, but music remembers." It's a good line. You might steal it for your own bedtime playlist. A mainstream historical fact floats into your thoughts. Under Sundiata and his successors, Mali controlled nearly half of the world's known gold supply. Let that sink in. Half. Meanwhile, Europe was still trying to figure out reliable plumbing. The wealth here didn't glitter, it pulsed. Caravans came from the north carrying salt, cloth, and yes, more of those glimmering glass beads. In exchange, Mali offered gold dust so fine it was stored in gourds, its value measured not by weight, but by rumor. You wander through the marketplace, letting the sounds and scents wash over you, roasting peanuts, burning incense, the distant echo of the kora. One merchant shows you strips of woven fabric dyed with indigo so deep it looks like bottled twilight. Another sells small amulets carved from ivory, each one promising protection against envy, heat stroke, or bad luck in business. You consider buying one labeled "Against Bad Trade Winds," but decide the shipping fees would be outrageous. A quirky little tidbit, some historians believe that Mali's traders used trained pigeons to send messages along the Niger's major trading towns. Imagine the ancient equivalent of text notifications, except with feathers and no delivery receipts. As the sun climbs higher, you watch boats glide down the river, long canoes carved from single tree trunks, stacked with goods. The Niger, you realize, is more than a river, it's a highway. From Niani to Timbuktu, it carries life, language, and trade like blood through a body. You rest beneath a baobab tree, its trunk swollen and ancient, like a wise elder keeping watch. A farmer beside you speaks softly about the yearly floods that feed the land, making it rich enough for rice, millet, and cattle. He shrugs and says, "Without the river, the gold would mean nothing. You can't eat gold." You nod, admiring the simple logic that so many kingdoms have ignored. Evening falls slow and soft, turning the river bronze. The griot finds you again and sings the final verse of Sundiata's story, how the hero defeated the sorcerer king Sumaroro Kante and restored balance to the land. The melody sways like water. You catch yourself swaying with it. As the song ends, the griot whispers, "When you tell this story again, don't worry about getting it right. Just make sure it lives." You promise you will, though part of you suspects he's been telling that same line to travelers for centuries. Later that night, you sit on the riverbank, watching fireflies drift over the water. Their glow reminds you of the glass beads, those tiny symbols of beauty and trade that seem to appear wherever history finds light. You hear the soft creak of oars, another boat setting out for Timbuktu. You think about joining it. That's where the stories are headed now, northward, towards scholars, manuscripts, and sand-blown libraries. The kingdom of Ghana has faded into memory. But here, in Mali, the rhythm of trade and story continues, steady as a heartbeat. Before sleep finds you, you look at the river one last time. It catches the moonlight like molten silver, flowing endlessly, carrying whispers of kings, merchants, and dreamers who all wanted the same thing, to leave something that lasts longer than gold. You stretch out on your mat, lulled by the sound of frogs and distant drums. The air is heavy, but kind. You close your eyes, smiling at the thought that somewhere in the darkness, another griot is beginning the same song, And somewhere far away, someone else is falling asleep to it.
Dawn in Timbuktu doesn't rise, it unfolds. First, a soft gray glow slides across the dunes. Then, a pale gold halo spills over the mud brick walls, lighting up the city's spine, the great mosque of Gingereber, its towers punctured with palm beams like ribs of an ancient whale. You wake to the murmur of scholars and the rustle of parchment. The air smells of ink, leather, and dust, the scent of civilization in its purest form. Timbuktu, the city of books, is not just a place, it's an idea, a mirage made real. You wander through narrow alleys where children recite verses from memory, their voices rising and falling like waves. In a courtyard, an old man copies lines of Arabic script on the parchment with the care of a jeweler setting a gem. He looks up, smiles, and says, "Writing is a form of worship." You pause. The simplicity of that thought lingers. For centuries, stories here have been carried not only in memory and music, but in ink. The scholars of Timbuktu, men and women alike, preserved treatises on astronomy, medicine, law, philosophy, and trade. They debated the movements of the stars, the ethics of kings, and the mathematics of the unseen. You pass by a library, not a modern one, but a family archive kept inside a mud house. The owner unwraps a bundle of manuscripts bound in goatskin. Some are written in Arabic, others in Ajami, African languages written with Arabic script. One page diagrams the phases of the moon, another lists herbal recipes for fever and melancholy. The pages shimmer faintly, their edges darkened with age, but still alive with thought. A quirky fact floats up in your mind. When European explorers finally reached Timbuktu in the 19th century, they were disappointed to find a city of mud. They couldn't see that beneath that dust was an empire of ideas. Over 700,000 manuscripts have survived, and that's just what's been found. Outside, the market hums. Merchants from across the Sahara trade salt from Tagaza, gold from Mali, ivory from the forests farther south. You spot a few glass beads again, smaller now, worn smooth by 1,000 hands. Even here, in this city of knowledge, beauty remains currency. You sip a bowl of sweet, minty tea beside a caravan master who's resting before his next journey to Morocco. He laughs when you ask what Timbuktu means to him. "It's where stories sleep," he says, and sometimes, if you're quiet enough, they wake up. You think about how far those stories have traveled, across dunes, across centuries. In a way, the Silk Road didn't just connect east and west, it braided itself into Africa, winding through the Sahara, carrying not just gold and salt, but language, belief, and melody. The caravan master tells you about the Tuareg, the blue-robed nomads who guide traders across the desert. He says their indigo-dyed veils stain their skin, and that they navigate by stars, wind, and memory. They call the Sahara Tenere, the place where there is nothing. You both laugh at the irony, because everywhere you've looked, the desert has been full of life, of echoes, of meaning. Later, as twilight gathers, you climb the rooftop of a house overlooking the mosque. The city below glows like an ember, alive but ancient. You can almost hear the pages turning in every house, the murmur of recitation like wind through reeds. You realize something. History isn't a straight line. It's a spiral. Each civilization whispers to the next. The glass bead, the song, the scroll, they all circle back, carrying fragments of the same longing to be remembered. A shooting star streaks across the indigo sky, dissolving before you can make a wish.
You don't need one anyway. You've already walked through centuries, from the fall of Ghana to the rise of Mali to the quiet brilliance of Timbuktu. And yet, the journey isn't over. Because beyond the horizon lies another world, the kingdoms of the forest, where rivers replace sand and trade becomes something entirely new. There, ivory and pepper, bronze and art will shape destinies as surely as gold once did here. But for tonight, you stay. You lie back on the rooftop, staring at the Milky Way spilling across the heavens like a river of dust and light. Somewhere below, a griot begins to sing again, not of kings this time, but of travelers who cross deserts in search of meaning. You listen, smiling in the dark, as if the song were written for you. And maybe, in a way, it was. The desert fades behind you like a dream you can almost recall, and ahead, the green rises. It's sudden, one moment sand, the next forest. You blink, half expecting your eyes to be tricking you. But no, this is the edge of West Africa's rainforest, where humidity wraps around you like a damp blanket, and every sound, every bird, frog, and unseen rustle feels amplified in the night air. You follow the Niger River as it curves southward, silver under the moonlight, until it splits into streams that nourish entire kingdoms. You've arrived in the land of Benin, not the modern country, but the ancient kingdom whose art would one day astonish the world. The city itself is startlingly clean and geometric. A vast wall, earth-packed and smoothed with red clay, stretches for miles, longer, some say, than the Great Wall of China. Inside, broad streets radiate out from the royal palace like the ribs of a fan. Palm trees sway, and the air carries the scent of smoked fish and fermenting yam. In the courtyard, artisans work by torchlight. You watch as one of them, bare-chested and calm, pours molten bronze into a clay mold. There's a faint hiss, then silence. When the mold is cracked open, a regal face emerges. High cheekbones, eyes slightly lowered, a coral-beaded crown resting upon the brow. You recognize the Oba, the king.
The technique is called lost wax casting, and the Benin craftsmen have perfected it centuries before Europeans ever thought of visiting this coast. Each plaque they make tells a story, a procession, a war, a celebration, a divine vision. Historians still argue whether these plaques were simple chronicles or sacred invocations meant to keep the past alive through art. You linger, mesmerized. The workshop glows orange with the light of fire and genius. A boy nearby grinds pigments made of ground stone, later to be used in painting ceremonial masks. Every movement is rhythmic, deliberate, as if the act of creation itself were a prayer. When dawn comes, you wander toward the palace. The Oba's court is waking. Drummers are already performing the Ijede, their beats rolling like thunder underfoot. Courtiers bow, their coral beads clinking softly. The Oba himself emerges, solemn, adorned with ivory bracelets that gleam pale against his skin. You're told that in Benin, the king is not just a ruler, but a bridge between worlds. His voice carries divine weight. His actions maintain harmony between ancestors, people, and gods. He rules over a network of guilds, artists, blacksmiths, ivory carvers, all sworn to uphold beauty and order. A gentle joke from one of the Oba's attendants makes you smile. Here, even the spirits pay taxes to the Oba. You suspect he's only half kidding. The technique is called lost wax casting, and the Benin craftsmen have perfected it centuries before Europeans ever thought of visiting this coast. Each plaque they make tells a story, a procession, a war, a celebration, a divine vision.
Historians still argue whether these plaques were simple chronicles or sacred invocations meant to keep the past alive through art. You linger, mesmerized. The workshop glows orange with the light of fire and genius. A boy nearby grinds pigments made of ground stone, later to be used in painting ceremonial masks. Every movement is rhythmic, deliberate, as if the act of creation itself were a prayer. When dawn comes, you wander toward the palace. The Oba's court is waking. Drummers are already performing the ijede, their beats rolling like thunder underfoot. Courtiers bow, their coral beads clinking softly. The Oba himself emerges, solemn, adorned with ivory bracelets that gleam pale against his skin. You're told that in Benin, the king is not just a ruler, but a bridge between worlds. His voice carries divine weight. His actions maintain harmony between ancestors, people, and gods. He rules over a network of guilds, artists, blacksmiths, ivory carvers, all sworn to uphold beauty and order. A gentle joke from one of the Oba's attendants makes you smile. Here, even the spirits pay taxes to the Oba. You suspect he's only half kidding. By midday, the market is in full bloom. Stalls overflow with palm oil, pepper, woven cloth, and, again, beads. But these aren't just trinkets. Each color carries meaning. Blue for the sea, red for royalty, white for purity. You learn that beads once symbolized wealth more than gold did, and that traders from across the ocean, Portuguese sailors especially, coveted them. It's here you witness an exchange both elegant and ironic. A Portuguese merchant offers boats of European cloth and mirrors in exchange for ivory and carved tusks. The Benin traders inspect the goods with quiet amusement. They know the mirrors will dull in the tropical air. The ivory will endure for centuries. You pause to sip palm wine, sweet and slightly fizzy. A local elder tells you stories of the first contact with Europeans, how the Oba treated them as guests, not masters. He says, they thought they brought civilization, chuckling softly. We already had one. That night, sitting beneath the stars again, you think about all the cities you've seen so far. Ghana's markets, Mali's manuscripts, and now Benin's bronzes. Each one contradicts the tired myth that Africa was somehow waiting for discovery. No, you realize, it was Africa that discovered itself over and over through art, trade, and belief. The fire crackles beside you. In its reflection, the bronze plaques seem to shimmer, the faces on them alive, watching, perhaps remembering. You're told the Benin craftsmen believed that bronze, unchanging and luminous, could capture the soul of a moment. You think of how far a soul can travel. A bead made in Egypt ends up here. A story born in Ghana is retold in Mali. A carving from Benin might one day rest in a London museum, whispering in the dark to anyone patient enough to listen. A curious detail catches your attention. Some of Benin's city walls are said to have taken longer to build than the Egyptian pyramids. Archaeologists still debate the exact measurements, but the scale alone is staggering. Over 10,000 miles of interconnected earthworks once ringed the kingdom. You look around and realize that you're standing on one of those walls. The earth is soft under your feet, still warm from the sun. You picture the thousands of hands that shaped it, bucket by bucket, year after year, until a city emerged strong enough to defy time. Far off, a drum beat begins again. Slow, steady, hypnotic. You close your eyes and let it sync with your heartbeat. You can almost see the rhythm carried downriver, through the forest, across the delta, connecting this kingdom to others, to places you'll visit next. And once more, you're reminded of the same simple truth. History is a network of echoes. Some echo in gold, some in ink, and some, like the deep bronze of Benin, will never fade. The air grows heavier as you move south again. The trees press closer now, leaves glistening with dew, and the air hums with insects that seem older than time itself. The faint salt scent tells you the ocean is near, though you can't hear it yet. You're heading toward the kingdom of Oyo, a realm where the horizon seems to dance between savanna and forest, and where order itself was once a kind of art form. When dawn breaks, the world feels warm and golden. You can smell roasted yam and hear the low chatter of traders setting up stalls. Oyo is alive in a quieter way than Benin, more disciplined, more deliberate. You walk down wide boulevards lined with carved wooden pillars. Every few steps, someone bows to someone else. Hierarchy here is visible, almost musical, a social rhythm that never misses a beat. You pass horsemen, tall, elegant, their tunics flowing. The Oyo Empire's cavalry was famous across West Africa. Their horses, imported and bred across generations, were as prized as jewels. One rider dismounts, his armor made of layered leather, each piece decorated with small cowrie shells that catch the light. He grins and asks, "You don't have these in your deserts, do you?" You laugh and shake your head. No, you certainly don't. The army, you learn, is not just about war. It's a symbol of balance, discipline, and unity. The Oyo Mesi, the council of noblemen, balance the Alafin, the king. No one rules unchecked. There's even a phrase whispered carefully among courtiers: the king must not eat alone. In other words, power is only safe when shared. Historians still debate whether this form of governance was the earliest example of constitutional rule in sub-Saharan Africa. You find yourself in the royal compound, a sprawling complex of courtyards and shrines. The Alafan sits on a dais surrounded by carved drums taller than a man. His eyes are sharp, but his smile is small and knowing. The drummers begin, and you can feel the rhythm vibrating through your bones, a slow, steady heartbeat of empire. Beside the palace, a market stretches endlessly. Women in bright cloth sell kola nuts, leather, and tiny packets of red pepper. A few stalls sell charms, feathers tied with thread, calabashes painted with symbols. A merchant tells you they're for ase, spiritual power. Even a stone, she says, can speak if you treat it right. You nod. You've heard something like that before, in the desert, from a griot. Different lands, same wisdom. You stop by a storyteller's corner, a low stool shaded by a tree. A griot, older than the tree itself, tells a story about the founding of Oyo, how Shango, the thunder god, once ruled here as a mortal king before lightning consumed his palace. Some say he ascended to heaven, others whisper that he simply refused to die properly. Either way, his spirit lingers, in storms, in drumming, in the power that hums behind every decision made in Oyo. It starts to drizzle, then rain lightly. Warm drops hit your shoulders, and you shelter under the eaves of a workshop. Inside, blacksmiths are forging tools, hoes, blades, ornaments. Sparks leap like fireflies. The master smith glances up and grins. "Iron doesn't fear fire," he says, tapping the glowing blade. "It needs it." You sense there's a lesson in that, about struggle, about refinement. When the rain ends, steam rises from the ground, wrapping the world in mist. You walk again, the smell of earth and ash filling your lungs. You can almost taste the metallic tang of the tools cooling on the anvils. A curious tidbit drifts into your mind. one that feels almost absurd. European travelers once recorded that Oyo messengers could run more than 50 miles a day, carrying orders from the capital to distant towns. Some say it's an exaggeration, others claim it's true. What's certain is that the communication network stretched like veins through the land, pulsing with messages, connecting distant provinces like parts of a living body. As night descends, you're invited to a festival. The drums call again, louder this time, faster. The Agungun masquerade begins. Figures wrapped in layer upon layer of shimmering cloth dance through the square, spinning until the fabrics blur into color. These are the ancestors, you're told, spirits returned for one night only. Children laugh, dogs bark, and incense thickens the air. One masked dancer pauses before you. You can't see his face, but you feel him watching. The mask tilts, almost playfully, and then he's gone again, spinning into the crowd. The moment lingers, almost too vivid to be real. You feel a quiet awe, not of ghosts, but of memory itself, how it walks among the living, reminding them where they came from. Later, lying on a mat near the festival fire, you look up at the stars. They're faint tonight, softened by haze, but you find one bright point and follow it. Somewhere north lies the desert you crossed. Somewhere south, the ocean still waits.
You think about Shango, that lightning-struck king, and how belief, politics, and art all coil together in these lands like threads in a tapestry. Nothing here stands alone. Even a drumbeat connects heaven to earth. You smile at the thought, half amused, half humbled. You whisper, "You'd never survive here either. Too many gods keeping score." The fire pops, as if laughing back. The sound of distant drumming fades to a slow, steady rhythm. The earth seems to breathe with you. And in that calm, humid dark, you realize you've left the age of empires behind and are stepping into something subtler, a world where trade, spirit, and survival merge in the shadow of the sea.
By the time you reach the coast, the air tastes like salt and wood smoke. Palms bend toward the ocean as if they've been bowing for centuries. You hear gulls and waves before you see them, that slow, rhythmic crash that feels almost like breathing. This is the Gulf of Guinea, where rivers like the Niger spill their stories into the sea. Here, kingdoms rose on trade, not just conquest. The tide itself was their messenger, carrying wealth and whispers across continents. You stand on a wooden pier at dawn, watching dugout canoes slide across the water. The fishermen sing as they row, deep, resonant harmonies that keep time with the waves. Their nets shimmer with morning dew, and for a moment, it's easy to forget how much history was written on this same shoreline. You've entered the Akan lands, home of the Ashanti, Fante, and other Akan-speaking peoples. Gold glints in the soil here, literally. You notice it in the rivers, in the sand, in the jewelry of even ordinary people. This region has been called the Land of Gold since traders first wrote about it over 1,000 years ago. The Ashanti, in particular, turned that gold into power. Their capital, Kumasi, is a city of order and artistry. Streets radiate out from the royal palace, and each one hums with a different rhythm. Blacksmiths in one quarter, weavers in another. Drummers and sculptors farther still. You walk past stalls selling kente cloth, its woven stripes glowing like captured sunlight. Each pattern tells a proverb. The snake climbs the raffia palm with care, one weaver explains, meaning even power must move wisely. Inside the palace courtyard, you meet a court historian. A man who wears gold bracelets and carries a staff topped with a golden bird eating from its own back. It's called Sankofa, he tells you, seeing your puzzled look. It means go back and fetch it. The past has something to teach you. You grin. If only every historian carried a staff like that. He laughs. then gestures to the golden stool, the most sacred object in Ashanti belief. It sits on a platform, never allowed to touch the ground. Legend says it descended from the heavens into the lap of the first Ashanti king, Usei Tutu, carried by a priest named Akomfu Anoki. It contains, they say, the soul of the nation itself. Historians still debate whether this stool appeared in the late 1600s or earlier, but everyone agrees on one thing. No king truly ruled without it. It wasn't just furniture, it was a covenant between people and spirit. Outside, a sudden cheer ripples through the crowd. The drums begin again, sharper now, faster. You follow the sound to a festival square where dancers move in bursts, their feet kicking up dust in perfect sync. Someone presses a gourd of palm wine into your hand, and before you know it, you're swaying with them. The air smells of fried plantain and wood fire, and laughter rises like smoke. Between songs, an elder tells you something quietly. Every drumbeat carries a message, she says. You can't just dance, you have to listen. She's right. The drums are not random. They speak, literally, using tones that mimic the Twi language. Some carry praise, others gossip. Once, she tells you, a drummer warned a distant village of invasion long before the messengers could arrive. A quirky fact, Ashanti diplomats used to send talking drums as coded letters. It's the world's earliest wireless communication, if you think about it. Historians still argue whether the British ever fully decoded it. By afternoon, the heat becomes thick and golden, almost tangible. You wander through a grove of cocoa trees, a crop introduced centuries later, but one that thrives here like it's always belonged. The shade is cool, the air humming with bees. You crack open a pod and taste the tangy pulp around the beans. The farmer laughs softly. You just ate money, he says. In the distance, you hear the sound of hammers again, not blacksmiths this time, but goldsmiths. You approach a small hut where artisans melt gold dust with charcoal, forming delicate filigree rings. The heat is blinding, yet their hands never tremble. One craftsman holds up a pendant shaped like a crocodile with a fish in its mouth. Symbol of power, he says. The crocodile lives in water, but breathes air. It survives both worlds. You nod slowly, wondering if he's really talking about reptiles or about people, the kind who survive change, empire, and contact with strangers. And strangers do come. Along the coast, European forts rise like stone punctuation marks, Elmina, Cape Coast, Anomago. You visit one, its courtyard blindingly white under the sun. At first, it looks peaceful, almost picturesque, but then you descend into the lower chambers where the air is still and heavy. You don't stay long. Outside, the ocean stretches endlessly. A ship sails far on the horizon, its sails glowing like bones. You wonder about the stories it will carry and the ones it will never tell. As evening falls, the fishermen return. The sky turns violet and the first stars flicker above the palms. Someone hands you a grilled fish wrapped in banana leaf, smoky and sweet. You eat quietly, listening to the rhythm of the waves. You think about the golden stool again, the idea that a people's spirit can be contained in something physical, something sacred. Maybe that's what these kingdoms all share, the power to turn material things, gold, bronze, glass beads, into vessels for memory. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of salt and wood fire. You realize this coast has always been a threshold between land and sea, wealth and loss, history and myth. And just beyond that horizon, the next chapter waits, one written not on sand or gold, but on the water itself. The sea glimmers like molten glass at sunrise, calm, too calm, as if it knows what's coming. You stand on the beach near the mouth of the Gambia River, watching the tide creep in. Seabirds pick at the sand where beads, shells, and driftwood mingle, each one carrying the ghost of a story. This coast, you realize, has seen more arrivals and departures than any other in Africa's history. Here, trade routes of the interior met the restless ambitions of sailors. And though today the waves seem soft and harmless, centuries ago they were the first notes of a global symphony, one that would turn wealth, power, and even human life into commodities. You meet a Mandinka trader named Bamba. His skin gleams bronze in the sunlight, and his smile is the kind that hides both wisdom and weariness. The ocean, he says, squinting at the horizon, is a good liar. It promises travel, but it never tells you what it takes in return. He's been to Gorée Island, he says, a small island off Senegal's coast that once pulsed with trade. In the early days, long before the worst of the Atlantic slave trade, the island was simply a bustling port where ivory, hides, and gold changed hands. But soon, the demand for labor across the Atlantic grew insatiable, and the old networks of exchange began to twist. You step aboard a small boat with him, the wooden planks creaking as you push away from the shore. The water slaps against the hull in lazy rhythms. It feels peaceful until you see far ahead the outline of the fort. Stone walls rise straight from the sea, glowing pink in the light. Gory, quiet, and deceptively beautiful. Inside, silence reigns. You follow Bamba through narrow halls and into low rooms where air barely moves. He stops before a small iron gate leading to the ocean, the door of no return. The name alone chills you. You touch the rusted frame, and for a moment, it's as if the air thickens around you. Bamba breaks the silence gently. Not every kingdom sold, he says. Not every trade was human. But the tide doesn't choose what it carries. You walk out again, blinking at the light. The gulls still cry. The sea, indifferent, goes on glittering. You find a small market near the docks where the descendants of traders still sell shells, carvings, and old coins from Portuguese ships. You pick up a small, round bead, pale blue, weathered smooth. It looks almost like the ones you saw back in Ghana. History, it seems, has a strange sense of déjà vu. A quirky fact you overhear from a local guide makes you pause. Some West African families today trace their lineage to merchants who traded glass for gold, but refused to traffic people, building secret inland routes to preserve their dignity and, sometimes, their lives. Historians still argue whether these ethical traders were myth or memory, but the stories persist in song and proverb. You sit on a stone step overlooking the sea, letting the sun warm your shoulders. The horizon blurs, and you imagine the ships that once anchored here. Portuguese caravels, Dutch galleons, British sloops. Their sails look like clouds then, beautiful until they came closer. Bamba tells you another story about how some coastal peoples began placing small mirrors on graves, hoping the spirits of the departed could see themselves reflected and remember who they were before being taken. You look out at the water and see your own reflection ripple there, distorted but still yours. Later, at sunset, the island glows amber. Musicians gather near the dock, playing soft kora melodies that sound like water running over stones. You lie back and listen. The notes twist through the air like sighs. Bamba hums along quietly. The sea gives and takes, he says. We still trade with it. Fish, stories, prayers. You realize this chapter of Africa's history isn't just about loss, it's also about endurance. The kingdoms you visited, Ghana, Mali, Benin, Oyo, Ashanti, all touched the coast in some way, and through it, the world. Gold, ivory, art, and intellect flowed outward. What came back wasn't always kind, but it changed everything. You stand again, brushing sand from your clothes. Night gathers quickly here, and the sky over the Atlantic darkens to indigo. The stars begin to pierce through, faint, familiar like the ones over Timbuktu. You wonder if someone centuries ago looked up from this very spot and thought the same thing, that no matter how far we travel, the constellations remain the same. A fisherman's fire crackles nearby. You join him for roasted cassava, still steaming. He speaks softly, eyes on the flames. "My grandfather said the sea is never empty," he murmurs. "It carries stories below the waves." You listen to the crackling fire, to the endless rhythm of surf. The sea's breath feels ancient, and the wind cools your face. You find yourself whispering a small prayer you don't fully understand, half gratitude, half apology to the people who crossed, to the ones who never returned, and to those who still listen to the ocean for answers. As the night deepens, the moon lifts slowly from the horizon, a pale coin cast on dark water. The tide turns again, eternal, indifferent, beautiful. You close your eyes, letting its rhythm pull you toward sleep. Somewhere in the distance, a drum sounds, faint, steady, like a heartbeat traveling across centuries. Morning returns, soft and silvery. You wake to the hush of the waves, still breathing in rhythm with the shore. The world feels slower here, as if even time itself has grown tired and sits beside you, quietly watching the tide come in. Your journey through West Africa has carried you from the golden plains of Ghana to the libraries of Timbuktu, from the courtyards of Benin to the echoing halls of Gorée. And yet, it doesn't feel like history has ended, only changed its costume. The same patterns remain: trade, beauty, ambition, sorrow, and the endless search for connection. You walk inland one last time, following the dusty road where the baobab trees cast long, finger-like shadows. The air smells faintly of shea and smoke. Children run barefoot past you, chasing a hoop made of wire. In their laughter, you hear something timeless, a sound that could have echoed in any century. At a small village school, you meet a teacher named Adama. She wears a bright yellow bubu, and chalk dust streaks her fingertips. Her classroom walls are lined with maps, not just of Africa, but of kingdoms long gone: Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Dahomey. "We teach them," she says, "so they know they come from builders, thinkers, artists, not only what the world remembers." She shows you a simple wooden board, covered in symbols, adinkra, from the Akan tradition. Each one holds a proverb, a truth. One stands out to you: Sankofa, the bird looking backward with an egg in its beak. "It means," Adela explains softly, "go back and fetch what you have forgotten." You write the word in your notebook, Sankofa. It feels like the perfect ending to a journey through centuries. As you leave, she presses a small gold-dusted calabash into your hand. "We use it for stories," she says, "to remind us that gold was never just metal. It was a promise of beauty, of legacy." That night, you sit beneath the same stars that guided the caravans of Mali, the sailors of Benin, and the dreamers of Timbuktu. The constellations seem to form invisible lines between the lands you've seen, a map made not of borders, but of memory. You think of the artisans who carved ivory to honor their gods, the scholars who copied verses by candlelight, the traders who carried salt, gold, and wisdom across dunes. the mothers who sang their children's names into the wind so the world would never forget them. And in that moment, you realize this story, the story of Africa's golden kingdoms, was never really about loss or empire. It was about light, about how human hands, generation after generation, shaped that light into something that could survive the darkness. Somewhere nearby, a kora begins to play again, soft, unhurried. The notes rise and fall like breathing. You close your eyes, the rhythm becomes your pulse. The storyteller's voice, old as dust, calm as the river, murmurs the final words. Once there was gold in the ground and gold in the hearts of men. But even when the gold was gone, the stories remained. And that is the treasure no one can trade away. The waves sigh, the fire burns low, the stars hum faintly overhead. You breathe out, slow and steady, and history, gentle, patient, endlessly alive, rocks you toward sleep. You travel southeast now, the landscape rolling into grasslands punctuated with acacia trees, the air humming with cicadas. The smell of dry earth and smoke from distant fires fills your nose. You've entered the lands of the Zulu kingdom, a kingdom whose name will come to echo far beyond these hills. It's early morning when you approach the royal kraal. Cattle low softly, and women carry water in clay pots on their heads with an effortless rhythm. You trudge along the dusty path, noticing how the landscape itself seems organized. Hills guarding valleys, valleys channeling streams, the natural world woven into the lives of its people. King Shaka Zulu, you've been told, will soon transform the kingdom. He's not here yet, of course, but his reputation precedes him. Stories of discipline, military genius, and reform float like dust on the wind. Historians still argue whether his innovations in warfare, the short, stabbing spear, the bullhorn formation, were revolutionary or simply an inevitable evolution of existing tactics. You think about the precision required, imagining warriors moving as one living organism, unstoppable in cohesion. Inside the kraal, you notice smaller treasures, beads of glass strung into necklaces, intricate shields dyed in patterns of black and red, and delicate gold ornaments shaped into abstract shapes. The gold here is softer, worn on necks and wrists, and the beads carry subtle messages. Who is married? Who is warrior? Who is healer? The subtlety of social communication through adornment fascinates you. You follow a Zulu elder into a hut where oral history is preserved. The walls are decorated with drawings of cattle, hunting scenes, and ancestral symbols. The elder's voice rises and falls, recounting tales of migration, conquest, and negotiation, how clans once united under a single banner, how alliances were forged through ritual, and how power was both tangible and spiritual. A quirky fact emerges. Some Zulu warriors reportedly wore lion skins during ceremonies, believing it would transfer courage from the beast to the wearer. It seems theatrical, almost comical, yet you can feel the gravity in it. Courage, after all, is both performance and belief. You stroll to the edge of a small river where women wash clay pots and children paddle canoes. The sun glances off the water, glittering like tiny glass beads scattered on the sand. Here, as elsewhere, trade and ritual intertwine. Gold from inland mines moves along these streams, while beads, shells, and cloth circulate between villages. You pause to watch a craftsman hammering a gold pendant in the shape of a coiled snake. He explains it's a symbol of renewal, shedding what's old, embracing what's next. You smile quietly, thinking of how similar motifs appear across Africa. Serpents, birds, and other symbols bridging memory, wealth, and meaning. Later, the kraal drums begin. Their rhythm is slower than Oyos, steadier than Ashantis, yet equally hypnotic. The dancers circle, their feet kicking dust, their movements precise. The beads on their bodies catch the light, flashing like the sparks from the blacksmith's forge earlier. You realize that every kingdom you visited uses sound, ornament, and movement to anchor memory, each a mnemonic of culture and identity. A man whispers to you about the first encounters with European traders along the southeastern coast. Glass beads were the favored currency, exchanged for ivory, cattle, and occasionally gold. The Zulu valued them not for their monetary worth, but for their symbolic power. Each color, size, and arrangement conveying subtle messages. Historians still argue whether these trades accelerated internal hierarchies or simply reflected existing social orders. Night falls, and you sit on a hill overlooking the kraal. Fires flicker, cattle sleep, and the wind carries the low hum of song. You consider the web of connections. Gold from inland mines, beads traded across kingdoms, stories preserved in song and dance. It's a network spanning centuries, showing how even distant peoples were bound together by objects and ideas. The air grows cooler. You lay back on the grass, eyes tracing constellations familiar from Timbuktu and the desert, realizing that the same stars guide traders, warriors, and dreamers across the continent. Somewhere a drum echoes from the kraal, deep and persistent, carrying memory across the hills. You smile, letting the rhythm sink into your bones, thinking, even here in the southeastern grasslands, the story of gold and glass beads continues. It's a story not of empires falling or rising, but of people, their ingenuity, belief, and quiet resilience. And you, lucky enough to wander through it, are merely another listener in the long line of witnesses. You journey now inland, away from the ocean breeze, across rolling hills dotted with scrub and termite mounds. The sun warms the earth in a slow, comforting glow. Somewhere beneath your feet lies centuries of civilization, built from stone and sweat, waiting to reveal itself. You arrive at the ruins of Great Zimbabwe, and the sight is immediately humbling. Massive walls of granite rise from the earth without mortar, their shapes curving gracefully as though they were meant to follow the contours of the land. You step carefully among the circular towers and high enclosures, imagining the kingdom that once thrived here. Great Zimbabwe is more than a city. It is an assertion of permanence, a statement that human hands can shape the very earth into enduring beauty. The largest structure, the great enclosure, is almost ceremonial in its grandeur. You walk along the walls, fingers brushing against stone polished by centuries of wind and sun, and feel a pulse, almost like the heartbeat of those who once lived here. Trade was the bloodline of this kingdom. Gold flowed north to the Swahili coast, where it was exchanged for beads, ceramics, and cloth from as far away as Persia and China. Imagine glass beads, tiny and luminous, passing from hand to hand, from village to tower, linking your journey across Africa in threads of commerce. Historians still argue whether the scale of trade was the main source of wealth or whether local cattle and agriculture underpinned the kingdom's true power. You wander through the conical tower, a stone structure whose exact purpose remains a mystery. Some suggest it stored grain, others say it marked the king's authority, while a few whisper that it was a symbolic throne for ancestral spirits. You smile. This ambiguity is part of the kingdom's charm, a gentle puzzle for curious minds. Quirky detail. Small soapstone birds, carved centuries ago, perch along walls and ledges. You hold one in your palm. It is delicate, almost fragile, yet it has survived storms, neglect, and human curiosity. Some say each bird represents a messenger to the divine. Others, more pragmatically, think they were just decorative. Either way, it's mesmerizing. As the sun dips, the landscape glows with gold and rose hues. You imagine the kingdom in its prime, bustling courtyards, women carrying water and rhythm with conversation, men crafting jewelry, and children running barefoot over stone pathways. The scent of fires, cooking millet wafts faintly, blending with the earthy aroma of stone and dust. You trace a finger along a carved wall pattern, thinking about the symbolism. Perhaps a snake, perhaps waves, perhaps just geometry meant to delight. The stones themselves seem to whisper, each curve and line an echo of thought and intention. A soft breeze carries you back to the idea of glass beads. Traders from distant lands must have marveled at the precision of the Zimbabwean stone architecture. How could a society in the interior produce such enduring structures without iron tools? Historians still debate the techniques used, though you suspect patience, ingenuity, and countless hands were key. By twilight, the shadows stretch across the valley, softening the imposing structures into gentle silhouettes. You sit upon a wall, legs dangling, and listen to the wind stirring through the ruins. Somewhere below, a small herd of goats grazes quietly. The birds you glimpsed earlier settle into stone ledges, still perched as sentinels of memory. Here, in this ancient city of stone and gold, you realize that the story of Africa's kingdoms is not just about wealth or conquest. It's about the human desire to build, to leave a mark, and to connect with the world through trade, art, architecture, and devotion. As night falls, the first stars appear over the horizon, pale and patient. You lie back, letting the silence, the stories, and the centuries carry you toward dreams, imagining the soft clinking of beads mingling with the whispers of stone. The journey south and east has brought you back to the coast, where the sea tastes of salt and history, and the air carries a whisper of change. You can almost hear it in the rhythm of the waves. A new tide is coming, one that will ripple through kingdoms, rivers, and deserts alike. Portuguese caravels appear on the horizon, their white sails glinting in the sun. At first, they seem harmless, elegant, curious, and polite. You step closer to the shoreline, watching as the sailors anchor near a bustling trading village. The villagers eye them warily, their curiosity tempered by centuries of local wisdom. They've seen strangers before, of course, but these ships carry something different. Not just trade, but ambition, coded in polished words. The Portuguese traders speak of friendship, of commerce, of mutual benefit. They present glass beads, mirrors, and small trinkets. The villagers examine them, appreciating the shiny objects while keeping one eye on the stranger's hands. You notice that the glass beads are finer than any previously seen. Cobalt blues, deep reds, sparkling green. It's easy to imagine how quickly these beads would become prized tokens, worn, traded, and woven into the existing networks of influence. A scholar on the beach tells you that some Portuguese records exaggerated the wealth of local kings, promising riches beyond imagination. They spun stories meant to entice and control. Polished lies, the scholar mutters. Historians still argue how much was myth and how much was early propaganda. You smile wryly. Deception is a trade as old as trade itself. You wander through the village, noting the ingenuity of the locals. Women balance baskets of salt and dried fish on their heads, men carry carved ivory tusks, and children play with miniature boats fashioned from palm leaves. The Portuguese may have thought they were bringing civilization, but in reality, the villagers had already mastered navigation, commerce, and diplomacy. Quirky detail. One local craftsman demonstrates a technique for embedding tiny iron filings into clay beads to make them heavier, ensuring their value. You watch, fascinated, as he shakes a small pouch of finished beads. They rattle like rain on a tin roof. It's a subtle brilliance, an unspoken lesson in cunning and adaptation. As the afternoon heat intensifies, you follow a group of traders into the shade of mangrove trees. They speak in soft tones about past exchanges with other coastal kingdoms, Benin, Ashanti, and Great Zimbabwe. The Portuguese are not the first outsiders, nor will they be the last, yet there is a subtle recognition that these kingdoms have endured because they understand both the value of goods and the meaning behind them. A drum beats softly somewhere inland, almost like a heartbeat connecting this village to others across the continent. You think of the glass beads in the sailors' hands and the gold in the rivers of Great Zimbabwe. Even these European ships, gleaming and foreign, are caught in the same web of trade, influence, and adaptation that has spanned centuries. By evening, the sky is painted with molten orange and violet, and the caravel's sails catch the last light. Traders begin to pack up, while the villagers retreat to their huts, their silhouettes dancing across the sandy shore. You sit on a low dune, feeling the heat leave your skin and the salt taste lingering on your lips. A local storyteller hums softly, recounting how kingdoms sometimes leveraged European arrival to consolidate power, trade for prestige, or secure technology, all while keeping autonomy intact. The lesson is subtle but profound. Outside influence is never neutral, and power is always negotiable. As night falls, stars pierce the indigo sky, and the tide laps gently against the hulls. You breathe in deeply, tasting the sea, history, and distant ambition mingled in one slow, endless inhale. The polished lies of strangers are nothing compared to the enduring truths embedded in land, river, and sky. And in that moment, the sea's rhythm seems almost like a lullaby, a gentle reminder that even when the world shifts, stories endure, quietly, patiently, and brilliantly. The inland paths feel softer now, dust stirred into a gentle haze by the late afternoon wind. You follow a narrow trail lined with baobabs and acacias, their long shadows stretching across the golden earth like fingers pointing toward stories waiting to be remembered. You find yourself tracing the legacy of trade, not just gold, not just beads, but memory itself. Every path you've walked, every market stall, every palace courtyard has carried objects that are more than wealth. They are vessels of identity, culture, and history. In this moment, you realize that the story you're following is as much about human ingenuity as it is about material goods. In a small village near a river, women pound millet in long wooden mortars, their movements rhythmically punctuated by soft humming. The sound resonates with the distant echo of drums, reminding you of the Oyo festival, the Ashanti dancers, and the Zulu warriors. It's as though the pulse of West and Southern Africa travels along invisible lines, connecting people through craft, song, and tradition. A local elder, seeing your curiosity, invites you to see the weaving of gold threads into cloth. The shimmer of metal glints against dyed cotton, creating patterns that carry proverbs, lineage, and memory. Each thread, he explains, is a story, a reminder of victories, alliances, or lessons from ancestors. Quirky yet mesmerizing, you watch a young apprentice count threads meticulously, whispering numbers like prayers. Historians still argue whether the symbolic power of gold and beads outweighed their economic value. But as you sit on a mat beside the riverbank, feeling the sun's warmth fade into evening, you sense that their meaning cannot be quantified. Gold was never just money. It was a bridge between people, places, and generations. Nearby, children chase a hoop, beads jingling around their necks. You remember Bamba's words by the Gambia River about the sea carrying stories below the waves. The threads you see here are like those waves, connecting inland kingdoms to coasts, past to present, memory to material. You wander through a marketplace where artisans carve ivory, shape clay, and thread shells onto necklaces. You pick up a small pendant, a bird mid-flight, its wings curved like the arcs of rivers you've crossed. It feels alive in your hand, a reminder that memory travels in tangible forms. A gentle wind stirs the leaves, carrying distant music. A kora, a drum, a chant. These sounds seem to merge, creating a lullaby of continents, centuries, and human perseverance. You think about the couriers who ran miles to deliver messages, the traders who exchanged glass beads for gold, and the elders who told stories so they would not be forgotten. The sun sets in slow strokes, casting long, soft shadows over huts and stalls. You notice the glint of glass beads, the reflection of gold, and the way the land itself seems to remember, every hill, every riverbed, every stone holding fragments of lives long past. Sitting quietly, you let your thoughts drift, feeling the interwoven threads of gold and memory wrap around you. These objects, these stories, these rhythms, they're not just relics, they are whispers of continuity. Proof that even as empires rise and fall, the pulse of human creativity endures, carried in the shimmer of a bead, the glint of gold, and the songs of those who remember. Night falls completely, and the stars peek out one by one. You lie back, letting the lull of wind and distant drums ease your thoughts. In every sparkle, every rhythm, and every glint of memory, you recognize the unbroken chain of connection that has carried these kingdoms and their stories through time. Night has fully settled across the landscape, soft and inky, broken only by the faint flicker of fires in distant huts. You walk slowly along a quiet path, each step stirring up tiny clouds of dust that catch the moonlight like scattered beads. The air is cool now, heavy with the scent of earth, smoke, and faint floral aromas from trees that thrive in the dry season. You think back on your journey, the savannas of Mali, the bustling markets of Oyo, the golden halls of Ashanti, the stone towers of Great Zimbabwe, and the shifting tides of the Atlantic coast. All these places have spoken in their own tongues: drums, laughter, beads, gold, architecture, song, and even silence. Each pulse, each glimmer, each word carried the weight of memory and connection. You pause beside a small stream. Water trickles over smooth stones, reflecting starlight in fractured patterns that remind you of tiny glass beads scattered across a woven mat. In the gentle rush, you hear the faint echo of distant drums and whispers of ancestors. It feels like the kingdoms themselves are breathing with you, their spirits folded into the rhythm of the land. A woman passes with a basket of dried fruit, her movements graceful and sure. Children trail behind, carrying tiny ornaments and beads, weaving a pattern that connects past to present in ways invisible to the eye. You notice that even the smallest gestures here, the shaping of clay, the counting of threads, the arranging of beads, carry lessons and stories, sometimes louder than any spoken word. Quirky detail. A man nearby balances a tiny glass bead on his forehead while weaving it into a bracelet. A small game that, he says, teaches patience and dexterity. You smile quietly, imagining how such playful skill has persisted for generations, a subtle echo of the vast networks of trade and craft you have followed. Historians still debate how much these beads and gold truly influenced politics versus symbolizing cultural cohesion. Yet standing here, it doesn't matter. You feel the pulse of continuity, the unseen thread connecting artisans, traders, and dreamers across centuries. Every piece of gold, every bead, every carefully carved stone has a story, and through them, people endure. The dust swirls gently at your feet. The stars above stretch into the southern skies, familiar yet different from the constellations you saw in the desert. You breathe deeply, letting the rhythm of night, land, and memory sink into your chest. Each exhale carries away fatigue. Each inhale fills you with the quiet marvel of human ingenuity and resilience. You lie down on the soft earth, feeling the world shift into gentle calm. The fires, drums, and distant voices fade to a subtle hum, like a lullaby composed over centuries. You think of the travelers, the kings, the artisans, and the children who walked these lands long before you, each step echoing, each action preserved in the beads, the gold, and the stories that refuse to vanish. Slowly, the rhythm of your breath synchronizes with the night. Pulse, tide, heartbeat, drum. You close your eyes, letting the dust, beads, rivers, and walls of stone dissolve into the calm of sleep. The kingdoms whisper softly through memory, their treasures not only material, but living, breathing narratives that cradle you in continuity and wonder. The wind carries a faint, musical hum, a final song of endurance, of trade, of culture, of human touch across centuries. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you drift, cradled in history itself, lulled by the gentle cadence of Africa's golden kingdoms, their stories, their beads, and their enduring spirit. The night deepens further. The earth beneath you is cool, and the stars stretch across the sky like scattered glass beads. You breathe in slowly, feeling the dust and the faint warmth of the day settle into a comfortable stillness. Around you, the soft sounds of distant rivers, low winds, and occasional night birds form a gentle symphony, quiet, calming, and endless. Think of all the kingdoms you've wandered through, gold-laden rivers, stone towers rising from the earth, markets buzzing with color and song, each place alive with stories, dreams, and memory. Even when empires fade, these stories persist, embedded in objects, songs, and rhythms, waiting patiently to be remembered. You can almost feel them brushing against your skin, whispering across centuries. Every bead, every thread of gold, every carved stone is a tiny pulse of human ingenuity, a soft reminder of resilience and creativity. The laughter of children, the hum of a drum, the measured steps of traders, All are part of the same enduring rhythm. Let yourself sink into it, letting history's gentle cadence carry away the weight of the day. The air is soft and still. The scent of earth and smoke lingers faintly. You exhale slowly, feeling tension leaving your body, and inhale deeply, filling yourself with the calm of centuries preserved in memory. Imagine the waves lapping at distant coasts, the wind whispering through acacia leaves, and the warm, golden light of sunsets you've already traveled through. Allow your thoughts to drift, unhurried. You are cradled by stories older than you, by hands that shaped beads, walls, and legacies. Let their continuity rock you, steady and serene, into the quiet embrace of sleep. You are safe here, among the whispers of kingdoms, the glint of gold, and the enduring rhythm of human creativity.